Hello and welcome to the garden. Today we are talking about watering. I maintain this entire garden with a hose that you see in front of you. I do it all by hand. I wish I had a more elaborate in-ground watering system, but at this time I don't. And so I wanted to share with you some of the tips that I have learned throughout the year to make sure that your garden stays alive. And I've certainly done my fair share of killing plants. So these are some of the tips that I have learned by watering only 2 to 3 times a week. Apologies for the loud digger noise. There's a major construction project going on right next door, and it's really hard to find windows of time to be able to record where that noise isn't impeding. So hopefully you can hear me well and that doesn't bother you too much. But here's some of the tips that I've learned by watering my plants. So the first thing I want to start off with is to talk about the size of the plants that you buy. When you go to the garden center, you will see stunning arrangements that the garden centers have put together in the hanging baskets or even in pots. And what I have learned throughout the years is that by buying those arrangements, I usually kill them. And the reason that I usually kill them is all of those stunning arrangements have been fertilized frequently as well as being watered once to twice a day. And because I only water 2 to 3 times a week or every 2 to 3 days, it means that those arrangements will quickly die on me, and that's not a good use of my investment. So instead, what I've learned throughout the years is to start with a small plant, and this also allows me to get creative and to put together my own arrangements. The second thing that I wanted to talk about with you was soil. You need to really make sure that any of the plants that you put into a container, that soil that you use is a really good grade potting soil. The bag will always tell you what type of soil it is, so make sure you get one that's for containers or potting soil. And there's even different grades within that. I buy the best quality one so that it has the most amount of vermiculite and peat moss and other substances that help retain the water. I also, for the arrangements that you see in the cocoa fiber pots right here, I add a sanitary napkin to the bottom of those containers so it holds just a wee bit more moisturizer. I found that has made a really big difference in the last 2 years for those arrangements so that they don't dry out super quick, because cocoa fiber pots will always dry out really fast. And that's just a quick little tip. And I do have a separate video just on how to maintain moisture in cocoa fiber pots. Another tip that I have for you is to use as big a container as you can afford and your space allows. So these pots here are quite big, and I just got them at Costco, and I drilled holes in them because they did not have holes in them. So when you use any big type of pot, you've got to make sure that it has some sort of drainage in it, because if your pot holds water instead of allowing it to drain out, that will cause your plants to rot. So you need to make sure that you also have very good drainage in your pots. So you'll see here that I have a really big urn, and I also here to the left, those urns are much smaller and they dry out much quicker. The reason that you want a big pot is the bigger the pot, the more soil you can have in it. And the more soil that you have, it means when you water, there's more places for the water to stay and remain and keep the roots moist. And because you are using small plants, that gives more of an opportunity for your roots to grow long and deep. And when you water, you'll have more ability for your plant to get the moisture in as quick as possible to all of the roots. The next tip I have for you is to water on a schedule. So I use Google Calendar, and I put all of my watering right into the schedule. That way I know what I need to do when I need to do it. And so the reason I suggest you do that is that allows you to be able to go away for things like a weekend or a certain amount of time, and you can actually put that whole schedule in advance so that you know to water on a Friday and then a Monday. And that way you're able to leave your garden and know that it will still be alive. So the next tip I have for you is using a timing system for all of your watering. And what I mean by that is I manually count for each one of my planters how many seconds I'm going to water it. So this beautiful feature pot gets 120 seconds, and I make sure that I go around the entire plant so that in the entire pot so that every plant gets water. I also come along and do the bottom section and it gets a light sprinkle, but this one here for sure is 120 seconds. When I come to plants like these ones, they will get a little bit different type of watering. So what I do with these ones is it gets about 30 seconds on each side, and I make sure that I have at least an inch worth of water sitting at the top. And by doing that inch, the water goes out very quickly. This particular plant combination tends to really dry out fairly quickly, and mainly because they're at the top, so the water really does drain out. So what I will do is 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, and by putting my finger into the soil, I know that the watering is enough. And I did take a big risk with these the other day by going away for too many days without watering them. And I had to revive them. And just a nice little tip for reviving plants is to use a warm water. And you can use that from your faucet and just fill up a container. Your hand has to be able to sit in the water because you don't want to scorch your hand or your plants. But keep it as warm as you can get, so it's comfortable sort of bath water that you're putting onto your plant. And by doing that, the soil will absorb water quicker, as will the roots. And it's a quick little tip if you're seeing that your plants need a little bit of help very quickly. I do that often with my hanging baskets as well if I've been away for a little bit too long and they need a fast resuscitation before I get to doing the proper watering them. So that's what I would suggest, is that you use a timing system, and you will adjust the amount of time that you water each and every one of your plants, because for a big system or a big pot like that at 120 seconds, as the plant grows, you will need to adjust that and add a little bit more time, because the plant now is much bigger and allows and requires much more water to come into the plant. So if I just walk over here, I'll show you what I mean from a timing perspective as well with the garden here in the back. So these ones here, that gets 90 seconds. These little ones here get 10 seconds, 10 seconds, and then 90 seconds. And I can always adjust that and add more time. And by using the timing method, it allows me to know whether I'm watering them enough each and every week. And so you really want to make sure that you are thinking about how long each one of your plants get, so that you don't overwater them, but give them enough water that they will grow and be vibrant for you each and every time that you come out to enjoy your garden. Another tip I have for watering hanging baskets is to really think about how the soil is absorbing all of the water. So what I mean by that is, when I come into my baskets over here, I will water this one for 10 seconds and then that one for 10 seconds, and the water will come out of the plant, but it's not really absorbing it very well at the beginning. So I will come and I will do another 10 seconds on each side. I may come and water some of the other plants, and each one of these has like a time, that's 90 seconds. And then I will come back and I will water that one for 10 seconds. And they will each get about 40 seconds, but in 4 bursts of 10. And that allows the soil to start absorbing a lot of the moisture that's in there. I also make sure that there is a quality control check by putting my finger right in the soil to make sure that the water is actually absorbing into the soil. And if it needs more, I will do more. That extra little check that you are doing manually each time just gives you a good perspective on how your plants are getting the water that they need. For things like herbs, right here, what I try to do is come in and find a spot so that I'm not actually damaging the plant itself. So in this particular case, I will always create a little spot at the back of my plant where I can put my hose. For things like basil, they do not like getting their leaves wet, especially because the water that we're using here in Ontario is quite cold because it's coming from Lake Ontario. And that water, if I was to put it on the leaves, would actually sort of damage all of my leaves. And it's really important to make sure that as much as possible that you're watering from the bottom of your plants instead of at the top and getting the plant wet. Try to come in on the bottom, choose a spot that you allow the water to get in as easy as possible. Now, the other thing that I've done is I've moved to a watering system from a timing perspective that is more about watering in the morning or in the day so that I don't create an environment for powdery mildew to occur. I used to water in the evening, thinking that was much better and would allow my plants to absorb the moisture over the night. And I was having too much problems with powdery mildew. So by switching to a daytime schedule, it's really allowed me to have much better results with all of my plants. So let me see if I can just get the camera stable for you. Now, the final thing that I just wanted to chat with you about is the tool that you use for watering. I found over time that by switching to a wand, it has made a big difference in how I go about watering my garden. So what does a wand look like? So this is a wand right here. And what I love about a garden wand is the ability for it to move. So you can adjust it to get into the environment that you need to water. I also really like the handle that's on it, and it has a locking system, so you can just quickly lock it so the water stays on and you don't have to be gripping it the whole time, which is great for people that have arthritis. And also, if you're right-handed or left-handed, it still works. It also has a volume control, so you can adjust how much water you want to have come out, which is ideal for any of the plants that you want to really be careful with the amount of pressure. So the other reason that I like it is you can see right in front of us, we have a very big plant. And up at the top here, I have to be able to reach in and get to these plants over here. So by having the wand, it allows me to get in and adjust way over there. So it gives me a super, super long arm reach. So just a little thought on succulent arrangements and when you're using things like cactuses or hens and chicks. When it comes to watering, your watering system will be very, very different for these than the rest of the pots. I've used a combination of both hens and chicks and true succulents. And succulents require a lot less water than any of your plants in your garden. So for these arrangements, they get about a 5-second sprinkle once or twice a week. So they don't get as watered as often, and they get a lot less water. The other thing I've done is I've made sure that around any of the true succulents, I have used succulent soil. So just around the base of them, that soil is a lot sandier and grittier and really allows for good drainage. But the hens and chicks, because they go naturally right into the soil in your garden beds, they can have potting soil. So I use a combination in these arrangements. I know some people would suggest that you use all succulent soil, but I find it just dries out a little bit too much for the hens and chicks, because in areas like this where I want the growth, if it was too dry, they would be drying out far too quickly. So I use a combo, and that's what works for me in these arrangements that I create. For areas like the herb tower, I tend to water the herb tower from the top, and I let all of the water go right through into each of the layers of the herb tower. And the reason I do that is cocoa fiber likes to dry out really quickly. And by allowing the water to absorb right through to the bottom on each layer, it makes sure that the cocoa fiber gets a little bit more moisture. I will even run the wand all around the outside of these cocoa fiber pieces so that they get moisture and it's not wicking away the moisture from the plants. That's how I've been doing the herb tower for years right now, and it does work really well. When it comes to containers that are very close to your home, you need to also adjust some of the watering schedule. Number one, the brick is going to make them a lot hotter, so they will dry out quicker. And also, they will never get any supplemental rain that Mother Nature provides. Because if I was to scroll up the camera, you can see that it actually sits under the overhang of my yard or of my house. And I think it's really important to mention that all of my pots here never get their watering from Mother Nature. Everything is done by hand. I never rely on Mother Nature to be the source of the water. And the reason I do that is when the rain comes down, it tends to never go in your pots the way you would like it to be. And because I'm working on a timing system of anywhere from 10 to 120 seconds for each of my pots, I can't guarantee that Mother Nature will do each of my pots the way I want them to be. And by going in and manually making sure that each pot gets enough moisture, it really does make a difference for the overall quality of the moisture that each of these pots are getting. So I'd highly recommend that you never allow Mother Nature to be your guide as to how much water you're getting in your pots. I'm going to talk a little bit about Mother Nature and the rest of your yard though too. For the beds that I have here in the garden, I do rely primarily on the rain to provide the moisture that these plants need. When it gets really dry out, I will come into each of the areas that are new gardens and make sure that they get supplemental moisture. And I do that by using either the wand, or I use a sprinkler that I set to a timer to make sure I don't forget about it. Any of the new growth, for instance, all of these new trees, they got watered every couple of days last year in their first year here in the garden. Now I make sure that I water them once a week, once every 2 weeks, and for sure once a month they get a really good watering. We've been very blessed this year to have a lot of rain and heavy rain when it came, to make sure that the garden is looking good. But in years where we have a lot of dry weather like last year, they would require a lot more water. A note on the hydrangeas. Hydrangeas do require a lot of water, so I do make sure that I water those as part of my watering system every 2 to 3 days, just here around the deck to make sure that they don't dry out and they stay looking nice. And a nice little tip here for you as well on watering a garden bed is to make sure that you water less frequently, but with more water. And the reason you want to do that is you want your roots to grow nice and deep. Deep roots mean that they're less susceptible to changes in the weather conditions. So if it gets really dry or very windy, if you have been watering every day, you get shallow roots. And shallow roots will be more at the surface, and that means that when it's dry or windy, they will dry out quicker. If you water less frequently, but with a lot more water, the roots grow deeper, and that means that they will not be as susceptible to the changing weather conditions. I found that that's made a really big difference in me being able to look after my garden and have it much more maintenance free for me. Another tip that I have is every time I add fertilizer to my plants, which I also put in my Google Calendar when I'm going to fertilize, whenever I do that, I make sure that I do a really good job of watering my plants thoroughly, and I wait about an hour before I come back with the fertilizer. What I'm trying to do there is to make sure that the plants are absorbing the natural water first, and that way when I come with the fertilizer, it's not kind of a shock to the system of the plant. So I will water, wait an hour, come back with the fertilizer, and then I will spray the entire plant as well, because I don't want the fertilizer to residue to sit on the actual leaves or the plant material. So I just try to make sure that that all gets down into the plant itself. Because with fertilizer, you're going to use a little less water than the plant actually needs. So by watering ahead of time, you make sure that your plant is nice and ready to receive the fertilizer. Now, once your garden is looking good and everything is well watered, you're still going to want to go away on vacation. So what I would recommend for that is to hire somebody to come and water your plants. Give them the schedule of the exact days that you want them to come in and water. Let them know about your timing system per pot so that they have sort of a guide to follow, and make sure that you pay them well. I have found that over the years, if I don't pay someone well enough to come and water my garden, they just won't show up. I also sometimes get the, students, because they love social media, is I will have them send me a picture in the garden every time that they are there, just so that we both know that things were done. And I will follow up to make sure that the garden was watered. It does take a little bit more effort on your part to hire people to come in to look after your garden, but it's totally worth it so that you can also walk away from your garden and enjoy other parts of the world, because you never want to be just tied to your garden full time. You need to be able to go out and see other ideas so that you can bring them back to the garden at another date. Thanks very much for watching this video. I really hope that all of these tips have been extremely helpful for you. I've found over the years that these are the tips that have helped me be able to grow this garden with abundance and not feel that I'm totally tied to being here every single day watering. There's so many things to do in life that getting outside and getting on your bike, going for a walk, I don't want to spend every day watering. So being able to water 2 to 3 times a week or every 2 to 3 days has really made a difference in me being able to enjoy the garden. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to see more videos from me, hit that subscribe button so that you can see the monthly tour that I do and some of the other new videos that will be coming this way. I do appreciate all of your lovely comments in the comment section, and I also appreciate all of the guidance that each of you are sharing with each other and with me on tips. If you have additional tips on watering that you've found to be useful, please share them here below so that we can also all grow together as a garden community. Thanks a lot, and wish you all a lot of fun in the garden. Take care now.